I think I have the capacity to mute you all. So here we go. Make your way into a comfortable seat and take a moment to settle and arrive. So close your eyes. And bring your attention to the parts of your body that touch something else. So the seat on which you are sitting, or the way that your hands touch your legs or in your lap. Any part of you that touches the floor. And let the weight of your body rest more deeply into those places. And feel the support underneath you. Find the central line of the torso. And lightly lengthen that line from the base of the pelvis to the crown of the head. And feel the straightness of the inner column of the body, and then relax around that line as much as possible. And recognize that both in our conversation and contemplation and in our meditation practice, and really as much of our daily life as possible, we want to find a position of ease that allows us, and simply by being more at ease in ourselves, listen from the space of the heart, and we speak from that space. So let your attention drop into the center of you, into your heart. And then join your hands together in front of that space. And we'll initiate together tonight with a single Om. So take a breath in. And gently over to your heart. Place your hands. Lift your head. So this is the final stage of Shiva's 5-part dance, and looking at over the last few weeks. And last week we spoke about Act 4, which really tuned us into the challenge and the suffering of concealment, of being of having the truth of who we are be hidden from our awareness. And tonight in Act 5 we encounter the sword edge that cuts through the ties that bind us in Act 4. So in Act 4, concealment is represented by Shiva's arm across his chest, closing off the space of the heart, and that the hand of that arm is turned so that the fingers point down. and they point down to the upraised foot. So in the image of Shiva as a dancer, he has one leg and has the other leg kind of crossed over in front of him. And it is that raised leg, and specifically the foot, that represents the fifth and final act of the dance. This act 5 is in Sanskrit anugraha, and it translates as grace. In the Indian tradition, the teacher, guru's feet are the most revered part of their body, and the feet represent that how the flow of grace descends from the heavens down into the earth, and the feet are what touch the earth and plant that river of grace firmly in this world of which we are part. And so the raised foot is representing that flow of grace down into the earthly realm. In concealment, in 4, we're forgetting the truth of who we are, and that's concealed from us. And in this act, we are encountering grace as the mysterious force that spontaneously illuminates truth. And it is the truth of our essence, the truth of who we are. And this allows us to kind of reconcile the struggle and the challenge of Act 4 when we are concealed. And the recognition here is that those spontaneous moments of illumination where grace shows us who we really are, not just each of us, but who everything and what everything is in the world around us, that those moments are the kind of antidote or the counterpoint to the function of concealment. Tradition, grace is recognized as completely spontaneous, free, and therefore available to every being. So it's not based on merit. It's not like, if I'm good, then I will receive grace, or if I do things that are harmful, I won't. The tradition very clearly says that grace is, it's equally available to us all, and it descends in unpredictable, spontaneous moments. So no matter how much we work for it or how much we don't work for it, we can't control grace. That brings us to the question of why bother practicing then? Because if we can't kind of control this moment where illumination occurs, why are we doing the practices? And one way to consider it is that the practices create the capacity to see those moments when grace presents herself and shows us the truth, and that we have used our practices to clear the way to see her on more and more subtle levels. So we don't need the huge burst of light. We don't need the lightning bolt to be able to see what's being revealed. We can experience it in a more subtle way. And the practices, dissolve some of the layers of concealment so that when grace arises, it just kind of spontaneously fills or beams through the more transparent situation that we've created inside ourselves. And so while we can't control it. We can prepare for it, and we can look toward it. One of the asana teachers, BKS Iyengar, he's one of the modern yoga asana masters, and he talked about grace being like a lightning bolt. And if you're turned to the or if your eyes are closed, you won't see it. And so the practices are to keep us pointed in the right direction with our eyes open, so that when grace or arrives, we see her and we can take in the truth that she illuminates. What she's really showing us, as we've sort of referenced all the way through our conversations, is she is showing us the truth that we are essentially ocean. You remember our metaphor that we've been carrying through the conversations. We've been talking about the individual wave rising out of the ocean, and from that perspective, not recognizing or understanding that it is made of the same substance that has created all these other waves around it. And so the power of grace is the power to turn us toward the truth of our sameness, that it is one fabric that has molded each of us, and also everything that we see and don't see in the world around us. And that is the power of this aspect of the dance. As we've been talking about, but just to kind of carry that point further home, this process of the 5 aspects of the dance: creation, maintenance, where something is being sustained, dissolving or reabsorption or retraction, concealment or hiding, forgetting, and then this moment of grace that illuminates and reveals the truth. This is happening, the tradition says, on all levels. So the tantric tradition says that this is happening on the most cosmic, largest scale, and it's also happening all the time on the relative plane inside each of us. So in every moment, something's being created, something's being maintained, something's dissolving, something is concealed, and something is being illuminated or revealed through the power of grace. That's constantly happening in this continual arc. And in the Shiva, that's held and recognized in the ring of fire that surrounds the image. So this is all contained, and contained is perhaps the wrong word, because it's really the universe is beyond conception, happening still, contained, even on that largest scale within this system. And it's also contained within each of us. The other aspect of the all happening at the same time is that there's a lot of energy shifting, right? There's creation, there's maintenance, there's disillusion, there's concealment, there's grace revealing the truth. And in the image of Shiva, there's the impression that he's dancing quite wildly. As we said in the very first conversation, his hair is throwing around and crazy flowing behind him in the fervor and the ecstasy of the dance. And so while that is happening, at the same time, grace is very serene and still, and his gaze is actually quite focused. So despite the fact that there's this level of activity constantly happening, where there's creation, sustained, things are dissolving, there's concealment, there's revelation. In the center of it all, there's stillness. And so there's this wild dance, and yet Shiva's gaze is very pointed. And dancers, when they are, and some of you might know this more than me, right? They fix their gaze and then they turn, their body turns and they hold their gaze as long as possible. And then they turn their head and they refine that point. And then they turn their head and they refine that point with each of the wild they're doing. And it's that same thing, that there's that point of stillness at the center of the wild and chaotic dance, out of which creation emerges, sustains, and into which it dissolves back into. And we could think of that perhaps as the place in the depths of the ocean where there is no movement, and then point currents rise out and spread and create waves at the surface, and so on. And the last thing about the image as a whole is that in the dance, Shiva is balanced on a small being, often called an imp, sometimes called a demon. And this small being represents ignorance or misunderstanding. And so he's holding down the misunderstandings and misperceptions and the ignorance, so that this performance is ultimately in service of revealing the truth at the essence of the entire cosmic dance. Any comments, thoughts, or questions from that conversation, monologue?
I have a question.
Yes.
So when you do glimpse grace and you have an instant of grace and you are able to perceive the ocean as opposed to the wave, generally it occurs in a moment. It's not generally abiding, and we can't remain in that state of grace. So what is the reason for being like spat out of that state of grace back into concealment?
So it's a good question. So the question is, and I'm just repeating it for the recording, what makes it impossible for us to abide in that state of grace and that situation? And I might say that there are rare, great beings, human beings, that are able to abide in that state, but that's not the case for most of us, for sure. And so what throws us back into concealment, and why? I had a cat. Her name was Dixie. And at that time that I had her, the bed in my room was quite low to the ground. So it just had a few inches between the base of the bed and the floor. And she was quite a small cat, and she could flatten herself down and slither. Even as an adult cat, she could slither under the bed. And she loved to slide under the bed and then bat paws out and, tap my toes with her paws as I was standing or walking in bed. And I knew this was a regular activity and a regular process. And I would see her at night when I'm getting ready for bed. I would see her, slide under the bed, wiggle herself under there, and I'd be like, I know you're under there. And then I would forget, and I would walk around the bed, and then I would, at an unpredictable, spontaneous moment, suddenly feel and she was never harsh, she was a very gentle cat, I would suddenly feel her claws on my toes, and I would jump and laugh, and I would have this moment of remembering, there you are. And a certain joy to it that I would, even though I knew she was there, and this happened almost nightly, even though I knew she was under the bed, I would forget, and then I would get to re-experience the joy and even the play of remembering that she was there and having that illuminated. And it's perhaps a little like that. So the power of grace is completely free and tremendous joy. And it's a joy for us to experience that moment of illumination. That concealment is, to some extent challenging. There's, the tradition says, and I think we've all experienced that to some extent, concealment is suffering, and at the same time it's comfortable and it seems real based on limited perspective. I am a separate being from each of you, from my dog, from this computer, from everything that's in the world around us. So that seems very apparent. And when I slide back into that perspective, then I have the possibility of having the joy of remembering in the moments where grace shows itself and I understand again what is true. And so possibly it's just part of the great dance, that it's ultimate, spontaneous, free movement that from concealment into moments of illumination, so we get the joy of experiencing the illuminated understanding.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Joy meaning also like joy, not necessarily, sometimes the what's being illuminated is not comfortable, but still it's like, there it is. It's like, I see it. And there's a certain uplifting experience in that moment. It's not joy it's not always joy as in happiness. Joy as in ooh, that's awesome.
I guess in some ways it's part of that dance where it's something, it's yet one more thing that's going to come and go and have this cycle. And I know this is part of the coming from the perspective of the non-dual, but just being like part of life on earth is necessarily dualistic, so that we can't necessarily recognize something unless we've had the opposite. And then it's the opposite that allows us to see, because I know in moments of when you have those brilliant ahas or something, one of those enlightening, great heart opening or whatever, it's so great. And then when I feel that expansive, at a certain point I'm like, I can't keep living. It becomes uncomfortable to live in that sort of ecstatic state, and it's almost so it's a bit of a relief then to sort of slide back into the usual. And like maybe it's not like you've started down here and you've illuminated, maybe you end up here instead, like you're not back where you started, right? There's that, what's that thing people say all the time, that once you've seen something, you can't unsee it.
Mm-hmm.
So even though you know it's there or somewhere, it sort of gets lost in the back burner somewhere, and then every once in a while it bubbles up again. Oh yeah, that thing.
Exactly. Yeah, and that, I think that's...
to think of grace that... Mm-hmm. Yep, keep going.
No, just that like when there's that outward expansion, the natural, just the natural... I think you're right, that like those moments of grace are moments of expansion, and then we contract, comfortable and familiar, but we don't contract back in as much. We're not as concealed as we were before, because we can't completely forget that which was revealed in that moment. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, this is nice because I sort of have never been able to sort of completely grasp the idea of grace. I never quite understood it in my head. So now I realize, okay.
Yes. Yeah. I said last week that Act 4 was in many ways the hardest act to understand, like to figure out like why is it here? And this one is the most mysterious. It's the hardest to explain and to put words to and to really conceptualize, because it's all kind of beyond conceptualization. Something that we really have to experience to know that it exists and to believe in it. And we all have, I think, on one level or another, experienced Grace's presence and her illumination. But we don't always catch it or hold it or put words to it.
Yeah. Each experience is going to be different, right? Mm-hmm. Like it could be a cat's paw, or it could be the biggest insight of your life.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? So from here, we're going to sit in meditation for about 20 minutes. So make your way back into a position that you can hold relatively still. Adjust yourself in any way that you need, and then place your hands either up or down lightly on the legs, or one over the other in your lap. And close your eyes. So even though, as we said earlier, we can't control Grace's presence or her appearance, We can't make it happen. And our practice doesn't guarantee it. And yet what we can do is open to that possibility and to cultivate the present mind needed to catch that flash when it appears. So with that in mind, settle more fully into your seat. You can even wiggle around a little bit to really settle the weight down into the body. Lengthen the inner column of the torso, as we did at the beginning, from the base of the pelvis to the crown of the head. And then deliberately and actively melt or dissolve tension. Recognizing that tension is a link to concealment. The layers of holding that interfere with our capacity to fully see. So dissolve layers of tension in the belly. So that the whole belly softens. We have lots of layers of cultural and instinctual tension that we hold in the belly. So spend a few moments really releasing any need to hold the belly in without slumping. Soften the area around the diaphragm so that the whole belly becomes soft, even permeable. Soften the muscles across the shoulders. Releasing the layers of responsibility and doership releasing burdens that we carry in the tops of the shoulders. And as you release those muscles across the tops of the shoulders, keep the top of the upper arm bones from rounding forward and the chest from caving in. Completely release the jaw so that tension in the jaw melts away. And let the eyes soften. And become still. See if there's a sense that the edges of the body dissolve into the space around you and underneath you. And now become aware of the center of you, a place midway between the base of the pelvis and a spot about a foot above the crown of the head. You don't have to have an exact location. But now, as best you can, dissolve layers of covering, of concealment, hiding, that close off the heart. And become as soft as possible. One of the ways we can think of mantra is that it's a call to grace, to tell her that we're here, receptive, open, and waiting. And I will sound a mantra, and I'll leave enough time for you to repeat the mantra after me. If you choose, you could also just sit and let the sound come in, receive the sound. And this mantra translates something like I bow or I surrender to the supreme universal force of creation, sustenance, dissolution, that conceals and that descends as grace to reveal the universal truth. So staying as soft and as open as possible. If you're repeating the mantra after me, you'll do it on the exhale. Om Parashaktiye Namaha. 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 Om Parashaktiye Shaktiye Namaha. Om Parashaktiye Namaha. Om Parashaktiye Namaha. Om Parashaktiye Namaha. Om Parashaktiye Namaha. Last one. Om Parashaktiye Namaha. Rest in the open space within. Alert, relaxed, present. very gently, begin to deepen your breath. Feel into the body, especially again noticing the places on your body that touch something else. And then join your hands together at your heart. We'll seal the practice with one Om. Take a breath in. And bow your head to your heart. Release your hands. Lift your head. Thank you.